Welcome to Asian Book Club, where we highlight Asian and Asian American authors. We are your hosts,
Jamae and Sabangan.
and I'm Stephen Park, and we're here reading our last read of Moto by Cindy Fazzi. And me and you, Jamae, have had different ways of reading this book.
Yes.
So you did the physical copy, and I did the audiobook. We've had this discussion before, but it's something that we had differing opinions on, and I think I probably came more around to your opinion than you coming around to mine. But the question is, do you consider listening to an audiobook reading? Like, quote unquote, the word reading.
Yes, I do think that audiobook reading is still reading, even though it's not a physical copy, even though it's not an ebook copy where your eyes are following the page. I still believe that audiobook reading is still considered quote unquote reading.
Yeah, so I think for me, the difference was in the semantics of it, saying that reading, as far as I knew it growing up, was a visual stimulus. It was something that you had to use your eyes for, and that would then define what reading is. I think for me, I've been doing a lot more audiobooks than I usually do, just to help me get through some of the reads, because time-wise, I've been a little bit on the busier end, and listening to an audiobook while doing different tasks is extremely helpful for me. Based on my recent habits, I still think of it as listening to the audiobook, but I think I've also become more open to interchanging the words and saying that I'm reading a book. But I guess my whole thing is in the difference between what the perception is on the person hearing that sentence. Like if I told someone I'm reading a book versus I'm listening to a book, it visualizes two different types of activities.
That's fair. I'm thinking about it in terms of an accessibility standpoint. For those who are blind or who have limited vision, it's harder to read in the sense of using their eyes when it's not a possibility.
Right. And I think you did bring up that point last time, so it was something I thought about. I think in my mind, for people that do live with that, like impaired vision, I think Braille was the equivalent to reading in my mind.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think because of the audiobooks that I've been listening to, and truly I think the way that you may view it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that reading is a comprehension of a story. It's taking in a story rather than the physical task of looking at something.
Right, exactly.
Right. So, I don't know. It was just something me and Jamae had as a conversation early on. And I thought it was a really interesting difference in opinion in that reading for me, as someone who like really lives in science and things need to be very black and white for me, it was something where I was like, no, it needs to be reading like a visual reference to a book, or for people that are visually impaired, some kind of tactile stimulus to then create that reading material, rather than audiobook and creating a whole secondary auditory stimulus. But I don't know. I think I read this book.
Definitely. And just to add on, the reason why I don't think it's just those who are visually impaired, I also think that those who are maybe paralyzed or unable to read Braille and are also blind or have visual impairment, I think for me it's all about accessibility. Reading can be multiple things. Like you said, it can be any way of receiving a story, and that could also be reading a picture, reading a room. It's about the absorption of what's around them, or about the story itself, like you said.
And so however you decided to read this book, we'll get into it in a second. But before we do that, let's get into our recommendation for the week.
Our recommendation for the week is Muñeca. Muñeca is a hybrid multidisciplinary dancer and biomythographic writer. Their newest project, Paru Paro, is a queer, trans, people of color centered artist and healing venue offering classes, workshops, and practice space in the Portland area beginning in 2024. Muñeca is known for their intuitive works and their visually exciting pieces. You can learn more about their work via Instagram at Muñeca, which is spelled M00NYEKA, or through their website, which will be included in the description.
And that's going to be our recommendation for the week. Okay, so we are on our last read, Moto by Cindy Fazzi. And we do want to mention that this was a gifted copy to us.
Yes, for our review.
Right. And so it really didn't change the way that I viewed the story.
No.
I still have my opinions on the books, which were mainly positive, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But let's go into the actual story. So this past read, we had read chapters 29 through 38, and that was on the physical copy, pages 214 through 280. So up to this point, what have we known?
So, the last read, we found out that General Reed revealed his true reason for hunting down Monica that second time.
Mm-hmm.
We also found out that Tess unfortunately gave the last information that she was ever going to give because she was taken away from us.
Yes, she was pushed, and yeah, that was it.
And she was unalived.
Mm-hmm.
And then Domingo uses investigative powers to essentially investigate the nursing home and their residents.
Mm-hmm. So we left off on the last read in 2008, and this was at the hospital that General Reed and Monica were in, and the plan was for Monica to donate her kidney to General Reed.
Yes.
Now, what we had known at the last read, like Jamae said, is that that plan had gone wrong. And so now we approach the scene where Monica and General Reed are going to go face to face, and Domingo is being pulled there by Monica.
Yes.
And in this scene, I think some pretty big revelations happen. So one is that Monica finds out that General Reed was genuinely trying to kill her.
Mm-hmm.
Domingo never said anything. It was more an intuition that got her away from doing the surgery.
Yes.
And then General Reed kind of blurted out all of the things that were the most racist, subservient, narcissistic things that he could have said. He talked about pretty much how everyone has a purpose, and his purpose is to be this great man.
Right.
And
Monica's purpose
yeah.
was to give up her life for him.
Yeah, like what kind of crazy thing? That's like the most evil character in a hero movie that I could ever hear.
Yeah.
It's like what Voldemort did. Like he would suck blood and things like from unicorns and say like, no, this is the given right for what I have.
Right.
It's so bad.
It is.
And with that, I think there's another very important piece in this puzzle, which is Domingo asks General Reed if Mary, who's General Reed's wife, if she knew about this whole plot going through. And General Reed replies that she's an angel and she would have never agreed to this plot. So we'll talk about that whole scene with Mary Reed at the very end.
Yes.
But I think that was a big revelation for the readers, because one of the things that we were thinking is maybe this whole goose chase for the third hunt of Monica Reed was another turn in events of kind of trying to like capture her and do something to her. But if Mary didn't actually know about the surgical procedures and what they were intended to do, and she was genuinely talking about giving Monica citizenship and then progressing that forward and giving her money,
right,
it seems like the intents were in the right place. So that then takes us to where most of the story takes place, and that's in the present day of this book.
And in the present, Domingo is here connecting the dots, not just at the nursing home anymore, because he starts putting the pieces together, starting with Luz's information about Galena Brooks.
Right. And so Galena ends up being a big part of this whole scheme of things, because she actually ends up being the bearer of the most information.
Yes, which I thought was very interesting that we kept circling back to Galena, because besides the fact that she's a defector from Russia, I didn't realize that that would be such a big part in the entire story.
I agree, because her character kind of came out of nowhere. It started with this goose chase going to this nursing home that Monica had worked in. And I was also curious why the author had put so much emphasis on Galena.
Yes.
Because it just seemed like a random person within all this, and she just had passed away. Now we find out that through more investigative work by Domingo, finding Jacob Grossman, who was her contact source and person that helped her get citizenship and things like that, it sounds like.
Right. Essentially, he sounded like he was a translator as well as a person to assist in the process of getting citizenship.
Right. And through Jacob, we were able to find out that Galena had this child that was kind of lost in the midst of all this. But that child ends up actually being Amari Penn.
Right. But we don't find that out just yet. Can we talk about how Domingo kind of just spills his entire story to Jacob Grossman?
Yeah, I thought that whole scenario was interesting, because that's where we got the most information about this Monica chase.
Right.
And yeah, Domingo spills his whole story out. To be honest, this was a little bit rushed in the process of trying to get to the end.
Right, like in order for Jacob Grossman to buy in, he then had to tell all the story, but by telling all the story, we as the readers became, I don't know, I don't think it was bogged down, but it felt information heavy. So, we find out from Jacob Grossman that there's this child. We don't know who this child is until Monica herself puts in the last piece.
Right. I think the reason I said that was at this point was when I had put two and two together, and I was like, oh, this child that she had, and I didn't know that he was going to be given up for adoption, but this child that she had to be Amari Penn.
Gotcha.
And that's why she wanted to make that connection with him. And then that's also why Monica was so adamant about helping Galena out to help create that connection. So I think at this point, there were enough hints from the author to kind of piece it together a little bit more.
For sure.
But you're right. We don't actually find out the full information until this manila folder that pops up to Tess's widower. And Domingo reads the whole letter out. That also feels a little bit rushed to me.
Right. I felt like it was too convenient that Monica wrote all of this down the way that she did. And the way that she wrote it to Tess, being jokey, I might die, that's why I'm gonna send this to you. And I'm like, is this really how you would send a letter to your best friend?
With concern of life for, especially?
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is reason to put things together like this. I think the summarization that happened in this letter was helpful to help piece things together. It's like
for the reader.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like things in the show where the main character, who's like a detective or something, will find this one little clue, and all of a sudden they get flashbacks of everything that's built up to that clue. That seemed like what this letter was. But at the same point, you're right, the voice seemed a little bit different than what it should be. Yes. Especially from the voice that we've heard Monica in all the way up to this point. And yeah, I just thought between the scenes of Jacob and Monica, this is where the story almost got dumped onto us more than just lightly unfolded. For sure.
It definitely felt as though the entire book was waiting for this section to give us all the information.
Right, which has to happen at some point.
Absolutely.
We have to find out what happens. And I don't think it was a terrible way to do it. It definitely created an interesting plot line that really brought things together. Like Amari Penn's story, I had no idea that that's what would have happened.
For real.
So it was very interesting. But that then leads us to what eventually happens, which is this elaborate chase that Domingo goes on, chasing who he later finds out to be Duling.
Yes.
He's chasing this red sports car and pretty much this briefcase that he has this like tracker on.
Duffel bag
That he has a tracker in. And this finally starts getting us to that end point where Domingo is actually able to start tying up some of the loose ends in the story.
Exactly. Were you shocked to find out that Duling was in the red sports car? And were you also shocked that Amari Penn was the son of Galena Brooks?
I think I was less shocked about the son part because of the fact that I pieced it together like 2 or 3 chapters before. Like I said, at that point where we found out that Galena had a child in wait, that's when I was kind of figuring out. So I was like, okay, I got the hint of that. The Duling thing came out of nowhere. I honestly forgot about Duling, except that he kind of has a fun name. But I was completely shocked that he was in that sports car and just didn't expect it.
I think I was the opposite. I was more shocked at Amari Penn being the son, which, like you said, you pieced it together sooner. So I was able to start piecing it together before the reveal. But I still, for some reason, I still gasped when I read the letter. On the opposite end, different from what you felt, with Duling, I was like, oh yeah, I knew it.
I mean, it does piece together the part of Tess's murder, so it definitely makes sense why he was put into that vehicle.
Right.
And he's kind of the henchman that's going behind closed doors that isn't the bodyguards.
Right.
So it does make sense.
Right. He's the extra henchman that the other henchmen don't know about.
Yeah, and that does all the dirty work.
Yeah. So this unfortunately means one of us was right in what happened to Monica.
Right. Because after Domingo reads the letter, he comes to the conclusion that Monica is no longer alive. She's unalived.
Which I feared that she was kidnapped and then unalived, rather than just kidnapped and okay.
Right. So this does lead Domingo to finally come out with his truest feelings for Monica, which was also a seemingly somewhat of a plot twist.
For real.
Like, I was not expecting Domingo to be in love with Monica. Not in that way. Not like... It seemed like he was much more expressing a romantic love than just, like, a familial or, like, other relational love.
Right.
So, I was not expecting that.
Nor was I.
Yeah. So, that love does explain why Domingo decided to let her go not only the first time, but now we know the second time.
Right. And in the second time... we get our last flashback in the penultimate chapter, in chapter 37, where we see both Domingo and Monica in kind of a domestic setting. They're having breakfast, they're having small talk, and Monica kind of tells him what her plan is. It's to go back to New Jersey, to go back to her love nest with Christian Price. And Domingo tries to say that he's going to drop her off, just wait for him when he comes back. And he leaves knowing that Monica won't be there when he returns.
Which is pretty much what happens.
Yes, and not only does he say that he knows that she won't return, he also knows that this is his last glimpse of her, which I think it was.
Right. This then leads us to our final chapter, which I'm curious what your opinions are on that chapter. So this is where Domingo goes back to Mary Read, and they have a whole discussion. And it seemed like, for me, like the licking of the envelope before you close it.
For sure.
What did you think of it?
I feel like Mary Read had so much sentiment towards Monica, when in the past there was so much anger and resentment towards her.
I feel like I don't remember the moment where Mary Read had direct contact with Monica as much. I feel like their relationship wasn't ever really created, so...
Which is why I thought it was out of place for her to be so sentimental.
Well, I think from the start, Mary Read wanted to atone for what her husband did. I think it was less of what she did to Monica, but more of what she felt that Monica deserved as repayment for not only being the rightful heir to the money that General Read had, but also for the situations in which General Read had put Monica in.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense that she would feel regret for not being able to... Because I remember that part. She regretted not reaching out to her sooner so that she wouldn't have been in danger outside of her husband's situation.
Right. I thought that this chapter had brought a lot to light within just a minimal conversation. So within this very seemingly lighthearted feel of Domingo talking to Mrs. Read, we see a connection between them form that's a little bit more than just the client and the bounty hunter kind of roles that they've had.
Right.
We also see that both of them had the best interest in mind for Monica.
Yes.
That this whole thing that had started out was meant to actually genuinely help Monica. We also see both characters showing regret for not having been able to do anything to help her earlier, which could have saved her life.
Right.
But in the end, Monica lived to her values, and that's what cost her her life. If she did not go hunt after Galena's son and try to explain this whole situation out to him, she would have never been placed in the trouble that she was.
Right.
So I think it shows the nature of the people who were trying to help Monica. Between Domingo, Mary Read, we know the situations of Tess. Like, there were so many people behind this person trying to uplift her.
Right.
But sadly, the fate of someone horrible created the tragedy on someone who was probably a very bright light in the world.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So let's talk about the story in general. What did you think of this read?
Overall, I feel...
That was a pun. This read. There was that read.
Wow.
There was general read. Anyways, what did you think of this read?
Of this last read or of the whole book in general?
What did you think of this whole read? The entire book?
Of this whole read, I believe that the book was still a great story. I feel like the pacing was very quick, and it did build the suspense for me and making me want to guess who did it, who's the one who we should be looking at, why are we getting all these pieces of information about this one person, and how are we going to find out more? And
I also agree. I really enjoyed this book. I thought this book had a very quick pacing as well. I think the story was very grasping, and it definitely made me want to keep figuring out what was going on. I don't think there was a chapter that ended that I felt like, okay, I'm good with this being that bookmarker point. I felt like I needed to go on and figure out that next piece.
Totally.
I would say that if I were to be a little nitpicky, the stuff that I mentioned earlier about how the plot line kind of gives out, how the story feels like it unfolds a little bit quicker, and with these more random characters like Jacob Grossman, I think that part I didn't like as much. But I did really like the introduction of very key and important characters that the author refers to often. So that I think if you have a better eye on mystery or thriller novels, you could have probably got these hints better than I would have.
For sure, for sure. Do you think that having characters like Jacob Grossman was superfluous, or do you think we should have spent more time with them?
I think some of the characters were necessary. I don't think Jacob Grossman would have been necessary. I would have hoped that there was a different way that Domingo could have found Galina's backstory. I felt like that whole question and answer thing kind of felt like this storyline of where the hero goes to the top of the mountain and then asks the guru, and the guru just tells him all the answers.
I see.
So I felt like there was a different way to do it. But otherwise, I think most of the characters that were in this story were put there for a reason. I mean, even Cutter, who we don't hear from ever again, but he was pretty key in creating that story and that timeline.
Yes.
Christian Price was absolutely necessary in figuring out where Monica was going to go next and why she went to San Francisco.
For real.
Yeah, what did you think?
I think that Jacob Grossman was a necessary character, but I feel like you said, there was all this question answer, and by question answer, it was question give all the answers. I feel like the scene in itself, where it was placed, the context, it took me out of the story a little bit, because I know that Domingo is an investigator, and he is able to go from place to place and be able to use his persona to get people to talk. But in this particular situation, he wasn't using his persona. He was just blurting out whatever it was that he needed to blurt out in order to get the story he needed.
Right. I would say that in the writing of it, though, how Cindy Fazzi, the author, describes the situation as a hot-cold game definitely made it feel much more readable. Like, it didn't stop the readability of the actual story.
Right.
It's just me being a little bit more nitpicky and wanting the story to have developed slightly differently.
That's fair.
I felt like it was given to us a little bit too easily.
That's fair.
One thing that I kind of was confused about in this story was how Domingo knew that Monica was dead immediately after the letter.
I think this is supposed to be like his intuition.
Oh. But that's what I kept trying to connect, is that once he finished that letter, Domingo knew almost right away that she had passed away. And as I was reading back on it, I still couldn't find that connection of what would have tipped him off to Monica being dead. I think the one conclusion I had maybe come to was the fact that Tess was also killed. So maybe knowing that the person who killed Monica would have also killed Tess, putting those two and two together.
Right. I think that's what I mean by intuition. I think that knowing that Tess was killed and she wasn't the main focus, that then Monica must have died too. In addition, because Monica had that idea already in paper saying that just in case I die, you have these papers, I think those two scenarios, Tess being dead, Monica mentioning that she might die, equals Monica being unalived.
Fair.
So, another question that I had by the end of the story is, how did Tess miss this envelope?
Well, she didn't miss it. She just put it on a pile.
Yes, but according to Manny, her widower, he said that Tess puts these in a pile if they're insurance or if they're bills. But this wasn't a bill nor insurance, and Tess kept saying, she hasn't contacted me, she hasn't contacted me, when she clearly has.
I don't know. Maybe Tess just thought it was from, like, AAA or something.
I don't know. If I was looking for my best friend, I would be looking for any form of contact, not just my cell.
That's true.
Another question that I had is, how exactly did Amory himself connect the dots between Monica and Tess? Monica might not have mentioned Tess, and why would she when she's trying to talk about Galina? And I don't know if you can track things through a burner phone, because you can't track the burner phone, so I don't know if you can do the reverse.
I mean, a possible storyline in it is that once he got rid of Monica, maybe he saw the contacts that she had and saw Tess was someone that Monica was contacting frequently. I don't know. This is me just trying to fill in the plot hole a little bit. But I agree. I don't know if there was a part in this book that explained that situation out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Dueling was just randomly going on a splurge of wanting to push people into subways. Maybe it had nothing to do with Monica. I doubt it, but maybe that's what happened. This Dueling was just like pushing people off left and right.
That would not be... That would not make me feel any better about the story.
But he's apprehended. It's fine.
He is apprehended, but that doesn't make that scenario any better.
Right. Would you recommend this book to people?
Yes, I would recommend this book to many people, especially those who enjoy mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically mystery, not necessarily thriller, because although it is labeled as a thriller, I think it's more of a suspense/mystery.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think this book is very good. Like I said, the readability of it is fantastic.
Yes.
You'll get through it pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Just because every time I noticed when I was reading it, I was able to get through multiple chapters at a time.
Yes.
Just because of the interest in the book. The other thing I would say is I would highly recommend the audiobook for this. So the person who does the narration is Ramon Diocampo. And his voices are phenomenal.
Yeah.
I usually don't like the playful characters in stories, but his voice work and the way that he goes through different accents and different roles is absolutely phenomenal. Like, I still question if it was just him doing all the narration.
Absolutely.
So that brings us to the end of Molto by Cindy Fazzi. And like we said, this was a gifted copy to us for our review. We're very thankful to Cindy Fazzi and Agora Books for giving us this copy. But that brings us to the end of Molto.
Yes.
But that will bring us to the start of our next book.
Yes.
And this book's also special.
This book is special because it's an advanced reader copy given to us for our review again. It's called The Stormy Maid by Vanessa Chan. Let's get to know the book a little bit more by reading the blurb in the back. Malaya, 1945. Cecily Alcantara's family is in terrible danger. Her 15-year-old son, Abel, has disappeared, and her youngest daughter, Jasmine, is confined in a basement to prevent being pressed into service at the comfort stations. Her eldest daughter, Jujubee, who works at a tea house frequented by drunk Japanese soldiers, becomes angrier by the day. Cecily knows two things, that this is all her fault and that her family must never learn the truth. A decade prior, Cecily had been desperate to be more than a housewife to a low-level bureaucrat in British colonized Malaya. A chance meeting with the charismatic General Fujiwara lured her into a life of espionage, pursuing dreams of an Asia for Asians. Instead, Cecily helped usher in an even more brutal occupation by the Japanese. As the war reaches its apex, her actions have caught up with her. Now her family is on the brink of destruction, and she will do anything to save them. Spanning years of pain and triumph, told from the perspectives of four unforgettable characters, The Stormy Maid is a dazzling saga about the horrors of war, the fraught relationships between the colonized and their oppressors, and the ambiguity of right and wrong when survival is at stake.
Perfect. And a little bit more about Vanessa Chan is that she was born and raised in Malaysia. Her stories have appeared in Electric Lit, The Kenyan Review, Ecotone, and other publications. She was a 2021 Stanley Elkin Scholar at the Sewanee Writers Conference and has also received scholar awards to attend the Bread Loaf and Tin House Writers Conferences.
So, that's our next book, The Stormy Maid by Vanessa Chan, and it's going to be coming out January 2nd, 2024, and by the time you hear this recording, it's already out and ready for your consumption.
Yeah, so get the book and read along with us.
Yes.
But what is our first read going to be?
Our first read is going to be from pages 1 to 82 in the physical copy, but for everyone, that's chapters 1 through 6.
Yep. I am excited to read a good story. I am hesitant. We've read so many dark books. I need more Happy Birthday or whatever's.
Happy Birthday or whatever, The Boy with the Bookstore.
Yes, yes.
But that's not saying anything to the awesome people who've gifted these books to us.
No, the books themselves are amazing.
Yes.
I think between the winter months in Portland and the lots of rain and darkness that we get,
right,
either you love it and these books fit the mood for what you're looking for, which is more of a Jamae thing.
Yes, I totally love it.
Yep. Or you're like me and you're looking for brightness in the form of something that may not be the sunshine that you're missing. But either way, I'm super excited to read this book. That's The Storm We Made by Vanessa Chan. And if you're excited to read along as well, or if you have any comments on the last book we read, which is Molto by Cindy Fazi, how can people reach out to us?
You can email us at asianbookclubpod@gmail.com, or you can join us on Instagram at asianbookclubpod.
Yep, and we also have our website, which is asianbookclubpod.com, where we have our bookstore for books that we've read in the past, books that we're currently reading, and books that we plan to read in the future.
And a great way to support us is to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast.
Otherwise, make sure to be happy, be healthy, and read a book.
Ingat!
Bye.
Bye.